In 1699, a Polish traveler was sailing home with stolen Egyptian mummies when a massive, unnatural storm threatened to rip his ship apart. Terrified that he had angered the ancient gods, he threw the bodies into the churning ocean, and the storm instantly broke. This event cemented a terrifying piece of folklore. Anyone who touches a pharaoh's tomb invites a violent death. To understand why these graves were so fiercely protected, we have to look at the Valley of the Kings. This desolate stretch of desert served as the ultimate ancient cemetery, where Egyptian royalty were buried alongside unimaginable caches of gold and jewels meant to fund their journey into the afterlife. For 15 brutal years, a former painter named Howard Carter and his wealthy backer, Lord Carnarvon, scoured that scorching sand. Their grueling hunt finally paid off in 1922, when Carter's team stumbled upon a buried staircase leading straight down into the bedrock. Behind a door that had been sealed shut for 3,000 years sat the untouched tomb of King Tutankhamun. The chambers were packed floor to ceiling with golden chariots, statues, and chests, an ancient hoard that would be valued around $16 billion today. But sitting right alongside that mountain of wealth was a chilling promise etched directly into the stone. The hieroglyphs warned that anyone who disturbed the king's sleep would be struck down by a lethal curse. Carter dismissed the ancient text as meaningless superstition, but by breaking that 3-millennium seal to claim the treasure, his expedition team unknowingly triggered one of the most lethal and thoroughly documented paranormal cold cases on record. The bodies started dropping almost immediately. Lord Carnarvon was resting in his tent when he accidentally sliced open a mosquito bite on his cheek while shaving. Within days, that tiny cut swelled into a massive, unexplainable infection that ravaged his entire body. At exactly 1:55 a.m. on April 5th, Carnarvon's lungs gave out. At the precise second he took his last breath, the entire city of Cairo went completely dark in a massive electrical blackout. If that sounds like a mechanical failure, consider that at that exact same moment, thousands of miles away in England, Carnarvon's otherwise healthy dog let out a piercing howl and dropped dead on the floor. Carnarvon was only the beginning. Over the next few years, 22 people connected to the excavation suffered bizarre, fatal fates. Archaeologist Arthur Mace effectively drowned as his lungs filled with fluid. Another visitor suddenly went blind before succumbing to blood poisoning. Carter's own perfectly healthy young secretary went to sleep, never waking up. The supernatural theories reached a fever pitch 4 years later, during a formal autopsy of Tutankhamun's remains. Researchers discovered a distinct circular blemish resting right on the mummy's left cheek, in the exact geographical spot where Carnarvon had suffered his fatal mosquito bite. With 22 corpses and a list of terrifying physical coincidences, the world accepted the supernatural curse as undeniable fact. Yet, when we examine this crime scene through the lens of modern forensics, we find killers that are much more grounded in reality. Sealing a room in the desert and leaving it untouched for 30 centuries creates a dense, stagnant biome that brews lethal hazards in the dark. The first invisible threat they encountered was a biological one. The burial chambers were heavily contaminated with Aspergillus niger, a highly toxic fungus that feeds and thrives on ancient organic decay, like mummified flesh and old leather. When humans inhale these ancient spores, the fungus embeds deep inside the respiratory system, triggering a severe inflammatory response. This provides a direct medical explanation for why Arthur Mace's lungs filled with fluid, and why Carnarvon's immune system collapsed into fatal respiratory failure. There was a second hazard baked directly into the architecture. In the 1970s, scientists running tests on Egyptian burial sites found distinct traces of naturally occurring uranium, thorium, and other radioactive elements trapped inside the tombstones. Prolonged exposure to this ambient radiation systematically dismantles human cellular structures from the inside out. This slow degradation of the body perfectly accounts for the vague, lingering sicknesses and organ failures the 1920s doctors couldn't diagnose. Howard Carter's team didn't anger a restless spirit. They walked wearing nothing but linen suits into a highly radioactive, biologically toxic biohazard zone. Still, that leaves one glaring question. Many of these men were young, active, and healthy. How did an environmental infection take them down so quickly and with such brutal efficiency? The answer lies in the human mind, specifically a phenomenon known as the nocebo effect. It is the dark, inverse twin of the placebo effect, where an intense, absolute belief in a fabricated threat causes the brain to manifest real, physical damage to the body. Once the global media began publishing the eerie coincidences and trumpeting the pharaoh's warning, the excavation team was steeped in a constant, chronic state of panic. Every shadow and minor cough became proof that their days were numbered. That severe psychological stress is scientifically proven to suppress basic biological functions. The team's collective terror crashed their immune systems, leaving their white blood cells entirely incapable of fighting off the ancient spores they were breathing in. This psychological terror effectively paralyzed their natural defenses, leaving them entirely vulnerable to the pathogens they had inhaled inside the tomb. The legendary Curse of Tutankhamun was built on a foundation of microbiology and physics. By tightly sealing massive amounts of organic material inside irradiated stone, the ancient Egyptians inadvertently engineered an invisible, lethal fortress that only grew deadlier with every passing century. It forces us to look at ancient archaeology in a much more pragmatic light. When we finally manage to pry open a forgotten chapter of history, the true monsters lurking in the dark aren't mythological gods. They are relentless, microscopic realities. So if you ever find yourself stumbling across a pristine 3,000-year-old tomb buried in the desert, maybe worry a little less about waking up the dead and make sure you packed an N95 mask. Do you buy the nocebo effect, or do you think there's still some ancient magic at play here? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.